For decades, she hid every scar beneath heavy gloves and veils. No one in her village dared ask why. Some believed it was shame. Others whispered it was punishment from the moon goddess herself. But the truth was far darker. And tonight, that truth would be summoned by the Alpha King. Before we dive into this tale of secrets and power, if stories like this stir your heart and keep your breath on edge, remember to subscribe and follow so you never miss the next chapter. The night began with fire in the sky. A crimson streak split the horizon, and the villagers rushed out of their huts, shielding their eyes as riders cloaked in black thundered into the square. Their leader, a man with the king's insignia carved into his chest plate, dismounted and unrolled a parchment. By decree of the Alpha King, the woman called Celine will present herself at once. The villagers froze. Heads turned toward the hut at the edge of the woods, the one no one ever entered. Inside, Selena's breath caught. For 30 years she had lived quietly, healing their wounds, tending their crops, asking for nothing but silence. She had built her life on invisibility, yet somehow the king had found her. She tried to refuse. Tell him I am no one. Tell him he is mistaken. But the guard's eyes glinted with cruelty. If you will not come, the village will burn before dawn. The words fell like stones in her chest. Celine wrapped her cloak tighter, hiding the hands that had betrayed her before, the hands that bore the truth. The villagers parted in silence as she stepped out, her face veiled, her steps trembling but steady. She did not look back. The journey to the capital was endless. Each mile dragged memories from her bones. The night of fire, the screams, the smell of ash. She pressed her palms hard against her cloak, willing the scars to stay quiet to not betray her fear. Yet the closer they drew to the palace, the louder her heartbeat grew, until the gates themselves seemed to echo it. The palace loomed like a beast of stone and gold. Wolves carved in obsidian stood guard on each tower, their eyes glowing faintly under the moonlight. The air was thick with authority, the kind that could crush or crown with a single breath. She was led through long corridors into a grand hall where silence reigned. At the end of the hall, upon a throne carved from black granite, sat the Alpha King. His presence was suffocating, broad shoulders draped in midnight furs, golden eyes sharp as blades. He did not speak at first. He simply watched her walk the long stretch, each step heavier than the last. Finally, his voice cut the air, deep, commanding, cold. So, after all these years, they bring me the ghost who dared to survive. Celine froze, her veil trembling with her breath. Ghost, survivor, words she hadn't heard in decades. The king rose, descending the steps slowly, like a predator closing in. He circled her once, then stopped in front of her. His eyes drifted to her veiled face, then to her gloved hands. The silence stretched until the hall itself seemed to hold its breath. Then, with the faintest curl of a smile, he whispered the words she had feared for half her life. Tell me, Celine, do you still bleed fire, still bleed? The king's words cut her open like a blade. Do you still bleed fire? No one else heard them yet. Celine felt the entire hall tremble beneath their weight, and for the first time in decades she realized there would be no escape. He knew. If this story pulls you deeper with every word, make sure to follow and subscribe. You'll want to see what comes next because the shadows we're walking into are only growing darker. The guards seized her arms, dragging her away from the throne room before she could breathe a reply. The king did not stop them. He only watched, his eyes glowing faintly, as if daring her to shatter in his presence. They carried her down twisting corridors, through iron doors and cold stairways into a chamber unlike any she had seen. The walls were mirrors towering, seamless, stretching into infinity. Every step she took, a dozen reflections followed, cloaked and veiled, eyes full of fear. "Strip her," one guard commanded. Her heart crashed in her chest. She struggled, but the guards didn't touch her further. Instead, the mirrors themselves shimmered, humming with strange power. Celine realized this was no cell, it was a weapon. The silent room. A place whispered about in old tales. A prison designed to peel illusions from flesh, to strip away any disguise until the truth stood naked. She clenched her fists. The room's hum crawled under her skin. Heat surged in her scars, begging to awaken, but she fought it down with every shred of will. Nothing happened. Minutes passed, then an hour. Still, her scars remained hidden. The guards exchanged uneasy glances. Finally, they left, bolting the door. But Celine knew she wasn't alone. Behind the mirrored wall, eyes watched. The king. He sat in the chamber beyond, hidden by the glass, his presence heavy even through stone. She could almost feel the weight of his gaze. "Show me," his voice thundered through unseen channels. "The room was made to tear lies apart. Yet still you hide. What are you, Celine?" She closed her eyes, forcing her breath steady. "I am nothing. I am no one." Her hand drifted to the mirror almost without thought. The moment her palm pressed against the glass, the surface screamed. A crack spiderwebbed out, slicing through her reflection. She gasped, pulling back, her hand trembling as if burned. The king's voice lowered to a growl. "Fear, not defiance. You're afraid of yourself." Celine staggered away from the glass, clutching her arms close, whispering under her breath. The mirrors multiplied her desperation, 1,000 versions of her breaking all at once. The chamber door slammed open hours later, and a thin figure was shoved inside, a servant boy, mute from birth, if the guards were to be believed. His eyes never lifted from the ground as they locked the cell once more. Celine did not speak. She only curled into the corner, praying her scars would stay asleep. But that night, as the torches dimmed and silence ruled, she noticed movement. The boy's thin fingers scratched against the wall. Not idle drawings. Words. Carved slowly, painfully, as if each letter cost blood. She crawled closer, her veil brushing stone. The words glowed faintly in the torchlight. "Don't show him. If he sees, you'll never be free." Celine's breath froze. She looked at the boy, his hollow eyes met hers. He said nothing, but his warning carved itself deeper than the scars she hid. And for the first time since her capture, Selena realized the Alpha King wasn't her only enemy inside these walls. She stared at the boy's warning carved into the stone. "Don't show him. If he sees, you'll never be free." The words burned into her mind long after the torches died, and when morning came, she understood this was not a prison. This was a game, and the Alpha King was the one setting the rules. If stories that twist like a knife keep you hooked, remember to subscribe and follow, because each episode only pulls you deeper into the shadows of this world. The door to the silent room swung open at dawn. Guards marched in, but this time there were no chains, no restraints. Instead, they bowed. One of them held out a robe of silver-threaded silk. "The king requests your presence," he said, though his eyes betrayed unease. Requests, not commands. The word alone unsettled her more than iron shackles ever could. They escorted her to a chamber gilded with gold and crimson, where nobles in fine robes whispered among themselves. Celine's veil caught every pair of eyes like a flame in darkness. She could feel the sting of their suspicion, their curiosity, their envy. Then he appeared, the Alpha King. No throne, no crown. This time only a measured stride that silenced the room. He extended a hand to her, not in command but in invitation. "Walk with me," he said. Confused, she placed her gloved hand in his. His grip was warm, steady, too deliberate. He led her into the open court, where musicians struck up a tune. To her horror, he pulled her into a dance. Whispers rippled through the nobles like wildfire. Who is she? Why her? Why now? Celine moved stiffly at first, terrified that every twirl, every brush of his hand against her sleeve, would betray her secret. But when he pressed closer, murmuring so only she could hear, her pulse faltered. "You move as though you've trained, but trained to kill, not to dance. Tell me, who taught you?" She said nothing, letting silence serve as armor. The king smiled faintly, as if her defiance only amused him. The dance ended, but the game did not. Over the following days, he tested her in subtle ways. A mock combat drill in the training yard where he forced her to spar against seasoned wolves. a banquet where he placed poisoned meat among the dishes, watching to see if she could sense it before anyone else. A council debate where he asked for her opinion in front of lords who barely knew her name. Each time she adapted, she fought with restraint, using just enough skill to defend herself without revealing her true strength. She picked the poisoned meat before anyone else, but claimed it was intuition, not knowledge. She deflected questions with wit, her voice low and careful, never giving away more than a sliver. The nobles grew restless. To them, she was no prisoner. She was something worse, an outsider the king seemed obsessed with. Rumors sprouted like weeds. His mistress, his secret weapon, his weakness. And through it all, Selene could feel his gaze sharpening. He wasn't satisfied. He wasn't fooled. One evening, during a lavish feast, the tension reached its peak. The hall roared with laughter and clattering goblets, but at the head table, silence hung heavy between them. Selene sat stiffly beside him, veiled and gloved, ignoring the stares. The king lifted his goblet, then set it down without drinking. His golden eyes locked onto her. Slowly, deliberately, he reached across the table. The hall hushed, watching. His dagger flashed. In one motion, he slid the blade across the edge of her glove, cutting the fabric open. The room gasped. Selene froze. Beneath the torn cloth, a single line of her scar burned faintly, glowing, as if fire still lived beneath her skin. The king's smile widened. "Ah," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "So the fire still breathes." The glow beneath her torn glove rippled through the hall like lightning across a stormy sky. Nobles gasped, servants dropped trays, and whispers ignited like wildfire. "She bleeds light. The woman bleeds light." Selene yanked her hand back, clutching the fabric closed before more could be seen. But it was too late. The damage was done. Every eye in the chamber was on her, and none looked away. The Alpha King leaned back in his seat, studying her with unnerving calm. He did not silence the whispers. He let them grow, until rumor and fear choked the air. By dawn, the entire palace buzzed with tales of the scarred woman at the king's table. By noon, the noble houses demanded answers. By nightfall, the king gave them what they wanted. He summoned the entire court to the great audience chamber. Hundreds filled the vast hall, lords and ladies, generals, priestesses, even the elder wolves who had once stood by his father's side. Selene was dragged to the center, her veil and gloves intact once more, but her heart pounded as though they had been stripped away. The king rose from his throne. His voice carried like thunder. "You all have questions. You all whisper in shadows. Tonight you will see with your own eyes." He turned, his gaze burning into her. "Remove your veil." The hall fell silent. Selene's breath hitched. The order was simple, but its weight crushed her. Every instinct screamed no. The scars were hers alone, carved into her flesh by fire and memory. To reveal them here, before the wolves who thrived on weakness, was to surrender everything she had hidden for decades. Her silence stretched. Murmurs began, first low, then louder. Defiance, arrogance, witchcraft. The king's patience thinned. His voice sharpened. "Remove it, or I will remove it for you." Still she did not move. Her fists tightened at her sides. The court erupted. Nobles shouted for punishment. Priests demanded cleansing rites. Generals muttered of treason. The air boiled with outrage, a mob dressed in silks and jewels. The guards stepped forward, awaiting the king's command. Selene closed her eyes. If they tore the veil away, if they forced her scars into the light, she would burn them all. She could feel the old fire stirring, rising from the pit where she had buried it. But then a cry split the chamber. An elder wolf, his fur silvered with age, staggered forward. His cane clattered against the stone as his knees buckled. The uproar fell to a hush as he collapsed, clutching his chest. With a trembling finger, he pointed at Selene. His voice rasped like dry leaves, yet every ear caught his words. "Don't you see? She's the reason we're all still alive." The chamber froze. The elder wolf's words hung in the air like a curse. "She's the reason we're all still alive." Gasps rippled through the chamber. Some nobles shouted for silence, others demanded explanation. Celine stood frozen, heart pounding as every gaze cut into her like knives. What did he mean? She had never saved anyone. She had only survived. The Alpha King descended from his throne with measured steps. His golden eyes blazed with something unreadable, anger perhaps, or triumph. Without a word, he seized Celine by the arm. Enough of whispers, he growled. It's time for truth. The court roared in protest as he dragged her from the hall, but none dared block his path. They descended deep into the palace, past locked doors and silent guards, into corridors that smelled of dust and iron. At last they stopped before twin gates of black stone carved with runes that pulsed faintly under torchlight. The forbidden archives, Celine whispered, shivers racing up her spine. She had heard stories. This was where records of the kingdom's darkest sins were buried, wars, betrayals, and secrets erased from memory. The king pressed his hand against the gate. The runes flared, and with a grinding roar the door swung open. Cold air swept out, carrying the scent of parchment older than time itself. Inside, shelves towered into shadow, crammed with scrolls and tomes bound in strange hides. Lanterns flickered weakly, their light struggling to pierce the gloom. Selena's every step echoed, swallowed by silence so heavy it seemed alive. The king led her to a stone table at the chamber's heart. Upon it lay a single scroll bound with a seal in the shape of a wolf's skull. "Your scars," he said, voice low, "are not random. They match the mark of silence, a sigil carved into children during an experiment decades ago. Children meant to wield a power no wolf should ever touch." Celine shook her head, retreating a step. "You're wrong. I was never part of—" But her words faltered. Images she had buried clawed at her mind. Fire, screaming, a circle of children, and the smell of burned flesh. The king's gaze sharpened. "You deny it? Then touch the scroll. Let it decide." Celine hesitated. Every instinct screamed to refuse, but her hand moved despite her will. Gloved fingers brushed the parchment and the ink bled. Black script oozed from her skin, seeping into the scroll like veins filling with blood. The parchment writhed, words blooming across its surface in a language no one else could see. Celine gasped. The words weren't written for the king. They were written for her. Her hand trembled as she read. The survivor of the mark of silence. The one who should have been executed. Her breath caught. The letters pulsed, glowing faintly. The scroll was naming her. Her scars burned, searing against the glove as though to tear free. The king's hand clamped down on her wrist. "Read it aloud." She looked up at him, terror and fury colliding in her chest. "No," she whispered. But the words were already alive in her mind, and she knew her secret was no longer hers to keep. What if the only way to protect everyone you love was to make a deal with the very wolf who threatened to destroy you? If you're hooked already, don't blink. This is the moment where everything changes. Stick around, because the truth you're about to hear will shatter everything you thought you knew about her scars. The scroll's words still burned in Celine's mind. The survivor who should have been executed. Her hands shook, her pulse thundered, but the Alpha King's grip was steel around her wrist. His golden eyes were merciless, probing, hunting for weakness. "You will not leave this place," he said, voice low, dangerous. "Not until I have seen what you hide. Uncover them, your scars, or I'll have your entire village dragged here and slaughtered before your eyes." Celine's breath hitched. Images flashed, faces she loved, children laughing, her mother's worn hands. The fragile life she had carved out beyond these walls. A village that had sheltered her in silence all these years. He would burn them all, and he meant it. Her knees weakened, but she forced herself upright, fire sparking behind her fear. "You want answers?" she whispered. "Then hear mine. Threaten my people again, and you will never have my scars. You will only have ash where your throne once stood." The king's lip curled into the faintest smirk, but his claws did not loosen. "Make me believe you," he said. She swallowed, chest rising and falling. Then, in a voice that was steadier than she felt, Celine bargained, "Spare my village, swear it. And in return, I will help you hunt the enemy you truly seek. His gaze narrowed. You presume to know what I seek? I presume to know you, she shot back, surprising even herself. Your wars are not against peasants in hidden villages. You're hunting something darker, something you can't face alone. For a long moment, silence pressed between them like a blade. Then the king released her wrist and stepped back, his shadow cutting long across the stone floor. Very well, he said at last. Prove yourself. The test came sooner than she expected. The enemy descended on the borders that very night, rogue beasts with burning eyes and howls that shook the trees. The king rode at the head of his warriors, and Selene was dragged into the fray beside him, clad not in armor, but in chains of expectation. The battlefield erupted in chaos. Steel clashed, snarls split the night, and blood darkened the soil. Selene fought to keep out of the heart of the storm, but fate drove her straight into it. A shadow loomed behind the king fangs bared, claws gleaming. He did not see. Kaelin, she cried. Before she could think, her hand burst with light. Not fire, not steel. Something older, rawer. The same glow that lived in her scars surged outward, striking the beast before it could rip into the king. The creature howled, recoiling as the light burned through its flesh like holy fire. Every eye turned. Warriors froze mid-blade. The battlefield held its breath. Selene's chest heaved, her hand trembling as the glow faded, but the damage was done. She had revealed what she swore would never be seen again. The king rose from the dirt, golden eyes wide, not in anger, but in shock. His lips curved into something dangerous. You weren't hiding scars, he whispered, voice cutting through the stunned silence. He stepped closer, his breath ghosting her ear. You were hiding power I cannot control. His whisper still clung to her skin like ice. You weren't hiding scars. You were hiding power I cannot control. The words haunted Selene all the way back to the palace. Every step echoed like a chain. Every gaze from the nobles burned like fire. The whispers in the halls had shifted no longer about a scarred prisoner, but about a weapon unearthed. And weapons she knew were never left free. That night, as shadows stretched across her chamber, she traced the faint glow pulsing beneath her glove. Her breath trembled. She had fought so long to bury it, to be ordinary, to hide. And now, in a single moment, all she had fought to protect dangled in the Alpha King's hands. A faint scratch drew her from her thoughts. She spun, and there, crouched by the far wall, was the mute servant, the same one who had warned her in the mirrored chamber. His eyes glinted in the torchlight, sharp, far too knowing. Slowly he lifted a shard of slate, words etched onto its surface with deliberate strokes. He won't free you. He will keep you. He doesn't want the world to know. Selene froze. Her heart pounded, heat rushing to her cheeks. He? The king? The servant's lips curled into something resembling a smile, mocking or pitying, she couldn't tell. He leaned close, pressing another slate into her hand. This one read, He wants to own you, to bind your power to his throne, to silence you forever. The ground seemed to tilt beneath her feet. A storm churned in her chest, betrayal sharper than any blade. The king had sworn to spare her village. He had agreed to her bargain. Yet if the servant's words were true, it had never been about safety, it had only ever been about control. For the first time, Selene's trust fractured. That night she waited until the guards rotated and the halls fell silent. She wrapped herself in a cloak stolen from the laundry and slipped into the maze of corridors, her every step rehearsed in her mind 1,000 times. Freedom if she could only reach the outer gates. Her pulse roared in her ears as she crept past torches, ducked behind pillars, slid through narrow archways. For a moment the night air brushed her skin, cool and intoxicating. She was so close until she smelled the iron. Her steps faltered. The scent of blood and damp earth led her not to freedom but to the lower cells beneath the palace. Drawn by dread, she descended into the shadows. And there behind bars, their faces pale with fear, was her village. Every elder, every child, every soul she had tried to save. locked in chains, their eyes lifted to her as if she were their last hope. Her knees buckled. Breath fled her lungs. The king hadn't just lied. He had already taken them. Her breath hitched as her people's voices whispered her name through the bars, pleading, breaking, begging. Celine pressed trembling fingers against the cold iron, fury burning through her veins like wildfire. The king had promised safety. He had promised protection. But instead he had turned her very bargain into chains. She rose from the dungeon with fire in her chest. For the first time in years, the scars beneath her gloves pulsed so hotly she thought they might sear through the leather. She didn't sneak this time, she stormed. Guards scattered before her as she shoved open the doors of the great hall, her voice cracking like thunder. "Why?" she screamed, her words ringing through the vaulted chamber. "Why lie? Why chain innocents who never bore this curse?" The Alpha King sat upon his throne, unmoving, shadows carving his face into something unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, measured, almost weary. "Because there is no safety without control." The court went silent. Celine's chest heaved, her rage spilling like blood from an open wound. "Control? You locked children in cages. You promised—" "I promise nothing I cannot keep." His eyes met hers then, and for the first time she saw not the sovereign, not the executioner, but something deeper, something she had buried long ago. A memory flickered unbidden. A forest. A night of fire. A soldier's hand trembling as it lowered a sword inches from her throat. Eyes that had looked away instead of finishing the order. Her lips parted, the realization crashing over her like a tidal wave. "It was you," she whispered. "That night, the soldier who should have killed me. It was you." The king rose slowly from his throne, each step echoing like a heartbeat in the hollow chamber. His armor glinted with torchlight, but his face carried a truth she had never wanted to see. "Yes," he said simply. "They ordered me to burn the experiment, to silence every last survivor. But I couldn't." Her throat tightened. "Why spare me?" "Because even then I knew you were not a curse. You were the only proof there was something greater than their cruelty." His voice lowered, almost a confession. "And because I was weak enough to hope." Celine's knees threatened to give way, torn between fury and a strange, aching grief. Decades of hiding, decades of fear, and all along the shadow that haunted her past had been standing before her as her captor, her savior, her king. The hall grew impossibly still as he closed the distance, stopping before her. His hand hovered, then pressed against her covered arm, over the scars that glowed faintly beneath the fabric. His gaze pierced through her, not cruel but claiming. "Those scars," he murmured, voice deep as stone, "belong to me as much as they belong to you." The king's words hung in the air like a blade suspended above her throat. "Those scars belong to me as much as they belong to you." Celine yanked her arm back, fury and dread clashing within her. "No," she spat. "They don't belong to anyone." But before the echo of her defiance could fade, the palace doors thundered open. Armed nobles stormed in, banners of wolf-crest houses snapping above their heads. Their voices rose like a tide of rage. "Bewitched! Enslaved by the scarred witch! Kill them both before the curse consumes us all!" Steel clashed as guards tried to contain the revolt, but the great hall dissolved into chaos. Celine's instincts screamed to run, but before she could, rough hands seized her arms. A dozen rebels dragged her through the carnage, snarling that the kingdom must see what she truly was. The king fought to reach her, his growl reverberating through the chamber, but the tide of steel drove him back. Celine was forced to her knees before the lords of blood and power, their faces twisted with equal parts fear and triumph. "She hides behind veils," one spat. "She hides what she carries beneath her skin. Show us the truth, or we carve it out ourselves." Her chest heaved, her heart slamming against her ribs. For years she had hidden. For years she had believed concealment was her only weapon. But now their eyes burned for her death, and the king, the man who had spared her once, bled against the press of blades trying to reach her. She looked up, voice sharp with defiance. "You want the truth? Then choke on it." Her trembling hands reached for the veil. Slowly, deliberately, she unwound the fabric from her face. Gasps erupted as pale skin gave way to jagged silver etchings, scar tissue patterns that pulsed with faint light, as though something alive dwelled beneath. But Celine didn't stop. Her gloves came next. One by one, she tugged them off, her hands shaking until her palms were bare. The scars spiraled like constellations across her flesh, glowing brighter with every heartbeat. The chamber dimmed. Torches flickered, shadows stretched long. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through stone and bone alike. And then light burst. It shot from her scars like molten fire, burning into the flagstones, searing deep cracks through the throne room floor. Nobles stumbled back, shielding their eyes, shrieking prayers that turned to curses. The air smelled of ozone, of stone splitting under heat that was not heat at all. Celine staggered, her body trembling as though something inside her was clawing its way out. This wasn't just light. It was pressure. It was hunger. The king's voice cut through the madness, desperate, raw. Celine, stop. But she couldn't. The power tore free of her like a living storm. And then came the screams. Not of awe, not of outrage, but of terror. Because the nobles weren't staring at her scars anymore. They were staring at what moved beneath them. Shapes pressed against her skin from the inside, writhing, alive, ancient. As if the scars weren't wounds at all, but cages. And something was trying to break free. The chamber convulsed with light and screams. Celine staggered, clutching her arms as fissures of radiance split across her skin, her scars opening wider than they ever had before. It was no longer light leaking out. It was movement. Something alive. Something ancient. The nobles scattered, weapons clattering to the floor, their bravado crumbling into pure panic. "She's not human," one shrieked, backing against the wall. "She's carrying it, the thing we buried generations ago." Celine's throat constricted. She could feel it now, the presence writhing inside her veins, gnawing at her bones, trying to claw its way into the world. For years, she had thought her scars were marks of survival. But now she understood they were locks. She was the prison. The floor split. Stone cracked like ice beneath her feet, molten veins of light webbing through the throne room. Tables splintered. The throne itself groaned, fissures crawling up its carved frame as if even the seat of power feared what was being unleashed. And then silence. The king dropped to one knee before her, his sword forgotten. His voice trembled, stripped of all regal command. "Celine, you must bind it again, before it consumes us all." Her eyes snapped to him, rage and clarity colliding in her chest. "Again?" The word ripped from her throat like a blade. "So this is why you spared me. Not mercy, not loyalty. You kept me breathing only to use me for this moment." The king's jaw tightened, but he did not deny it. It was the only way to keep the kingdom safe. You were the key. The words seared through her worse than the power tearing her apart. She was never seen as a survivor, never as a woman, only as a weapon. A cage. The light surged higher, flooding the hall until shadows vanished entirely. Nobles collapsed, shielding their eyes, howling prayers to gods that would not come. The thing inside her pressed harder, its hunger licking at her ribs, its whispers slithering into her mind. "Free me. Free me." Her knees buckled. She screamed not in fear, but in fury. Her voice rang across the ruins of the court. No more chains, no more masters. The scars split wide. A tidal wave of force exploded outward, tearing the throne room apart in a storm of shattered stone and twisted banners. Walls cracked, chandeliers fell. The great throne itself crumbled beneath the weight of her awakening. When the dust settled, only silence remained. The nobles lay scattered and broken. The banners of their houses burned to ash. The king knelt, blood running down his brow, staring up at her not with command but with fear. Celine stood amidst the ruin, her body still glowing faintly, the thing within her momentarily subdued but restless, eager for more. She gazed at the shattered throne, the symbol of centuries of lies and control. Her voice was steady, sharp as steel. "These scars were never yours to demand." She raised her glowing hand, placing it on the broken throne's armrest. "They were my crown all along." The hall quaked again, not with terror this time, but with the promise of a reign born from fire, scars, and defiance. Celine claims her scars not as chains, but as her crown, leaving the palace in ruins, and the kingdom on the brink of a new era, with a power no one can control but her.